Welcome to week 6 of the NFL and Smashmouthing football, and I'm here with our usual UK correspondent, Conor Perrett, to discuss all things NFL. So, Conor, what did you make of last weekend?
It was good, thank you. Thanks for being back again. It's always good, but yeah, NFL's it's going along quickly, isn't it? And we're at week 6. It feels gets quicker every week.
At the moment, we're kind of like cutting the wheat from the chaff, and we see the top teams rising. And your Detroit Lions, that's what five? That's 4-1 after 5 weeks,
Mm.
looking like one of the strongest teams in the NFC.
Yeah, we're looking good, thank you. Playing good on both sides of the ball, and just even with some injuries, I think we're pretty beat up against this Panthers team. But we're next man up approach is what Campbell's always implemented, and it's gone well, really. Yeah.
Do you consider the Detroit Lions contenders for a Super Bowl at this stage? Do you think they're one of the top teams?
I think it'll be interesting. I mean, we have shown that we can win big games, winning in Arrowhead at week 1, but I wouldn't go as far to say that now. But I definitely think if talking on the NFC kind of things, I think if you say the Eagles and the 49ers are the two established teams up there, I think we should be put in the tier with a Dallas Cowboys for sure.
Where do you rank Brock Purdy actually in terms of if you were making a list of the top quarterbacks? Is he a top 10 quarterback? Is he a top 5 quarterback?
Yeah, I think I
What's
think
your
he's
opinion of him
definitely
so
well, he's
far?
definitely better than a seventh round pick what he was last season for sure. But it's hard to know because, like I say, that team is so well. But he is playing on those levels. Does he's got again, you got to just play what you're dealt with. And if he's dealt Christian McCarthy, if he's dealt George Kittle, if he's dealt Devo Samuel, you've still got to go out and do it. And he's doing it. So I think, like I say, he's leading a team that's probably the best in football right now. So I think I would probably put him around about that, yeah, top 10, if not in it.
And one of the impressive things about him is his decision making. He rarely makes a mistake. We've seen in the last few years of one of the ways that the 49ers have come up short was that Jimmy Garoppolo on a big game would turn over the ball, he'd make a bad read. Um, it didn't seem to be as synced on offense. Whereas now with Brock Purdy pulling the strings, he doesn't really seem to make very many mistakes. He seems to follow the game plan to the letter. He's very, very accurate at throwing the ball. And it's really, really hard to see a weakness on this 49ers defense or team, offense and defense. For me, they're the front runners for to be the Super Bowl winners this year, but we all know how quickly things can change in the NFL. One game I'd actually like to ask you about last weekend was the Steelers and the Ravens.
I think questions will be asked about the Ravens. You know, you feel there's a lot of times I feel like they're up in games where you feel they can't lose it, and somehow they throw it away. Lamar Jackson throwing an interception in the red zone right on the goal line with Joey Porter, the second round pick. I think at his first start, getting that big interception to set up that touchdown drive. So I think the Lamar Jackson would be frustrated. I think the Ravens, sorry, they've gone out and got receivers for him this offseason. It feels with Zay Flowers and Odell Beckham, but Beckham can't stay healthy at the minute, and it's causing a bit of offensive frustration for the Ravens for sure.
The one thing I noticed on Sunday was the amount of drops where Lamar had the ball on the money and his receivers, this receiving core that's supposed to be one of the areas that they've targeted in the offseason, keep dropping the ball. How do you think Lamar is playing overall through the first 5 weeks of the season?
Like I said, I think obviously that is hurting them quite a lot. Drops can be really frustrating and hurt you. So I don't think he's playing bad at all, or the reason why they're losing games like the Steelers. But yeah, for sure, I don't think he's playing quite as on par with as to his MVP season. But I don't think you can expect that. They changed offensive coordinators in the off season, so there's going to take some time to get used to a new system. So I'm not too worried or anything. I think Jackson, I think as the season goes on, he has steadily improved, if he can stay healthy and that they use that rushing ability more.
I think maybe the fact that he was missing the last two Decembers in the NFL, maybe they're get him to use his legs a little bit less, especially over the first half of the season, and maybe be a bit fresher towards the end of the season and maybe into a playoff run. With the Steelers, their backs were to the wall. They had to win. It's their biggest rivalry. How did they do it, considering they didn't have a lot of offense through three quarters of that game?
No, yeah, it was the duo drafter from last year. George Pickens come up with a big catch. I don't think Kenny Pickett played his best game by any means, but George Pickens he's really shown to be a number one receiver in that team, and I think he's a guy that fell in the draft, and probably there are a few teams that regret not taking him now.
And do you see any other weapons on the Steelers offense that they can lean on going forward?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they got a few people in the backfield. Obviously, Najee Harris, we know what he's capable of. We've seen it at Alabama in college, and we saw it in his rookie year. I'm a big fan of Jalen Wardell, I think it is. I'm quite a fan of him. He's great at the backfield in the receiving game. So I think there are weapons there. Obviously, the offensive line's really struggling, and I'm not the biggest fan of the OC Canada, but they've got some weapons to work to. It's just, can they start get Pickett a bit more up to speed with things and a bit more like an average quarterback in the NFL?
Okay, let's go on to Thursday night football, and we have the Kansas City Chiefs, Super Bowl champions, hosting the Denver Broncos, who are 1-4 and coming off a poor loss against the New York Jets. One of the problems seems to be with the Broncos has been their run defense. I think opposing teams are averaging 5.9 yards a carry, which just seems extreme. Like, why would you even bother passing the ball when every time you run the ball, you're making almost 6 yards a carry? What do you make of First of all, let's concentrate on the Broncos defense. What do you make of it so far? What can they do considering the Chiefs are coming to town, or the Chiefs are hosting them in this game?
Yeah, it's definitely been awful. It's practically the worst defense in the league, and it's kind of a bit funny because last season with Nathaniel Hackett, it was more the offense struggling and the defense carrying them, and now this year it's vice versa and flipped completely. So I think they lead the league in missed tackles. So I think for sure that they've got to clear that up. So I don't think it's too much a huge problem. Like I say, it's just silly mistakes really, miscommunication, inconsistent missed tackles is screwing them up and allowing these huge runs that are beating them. And if they just carry on, they just keep conceding up 30 points. I think Russell Wilson's actually playing a bit better this year. His touchdown to interception ratio is 11-2. He's still not playing up to that contract that he's got or anything like the Seahawks Russell Wilson we've seen. But yeah, this defense really needs to switch up really and turn up a little bit, because it's really letting the team down for sure.
And do you think it's down to coaching, or do you think it's down to personnel, or why are they struggling so badly considering they were considered a top, I wouldn't say a top defense, but one of the better defenses in the league last year?
Yeah, it's hard to know because, like I said, there's some good players on there. Patrick Surtain, the corner, is one of the better players at his position, really. So I think the personnel, obviously, it's not great at all on that D line, if I have to be honest. So I think coaching, obviously, they had a great defensive coordinator last year who went to the Panthers. So I think Sean Payton, I think he has to take some blame because this defense has gotten a lot worse from last year, and he mocked this team a lot last year. So coaching for sure has got to get better. And like I say, it's the small mistakes like miscommunications on big passes and just constantly not bringing down your tackler. So I think it's easily fixable if I'm being honest.
Yeah, I saw a really good stat on Patrick Surtain. I think during the first 5 weeks of the season, he's covered Devante Adams, Terry McLaurin, Tyreek Hill, DJ Moore, and Garrett Wilson, and he's given up 76 yards and 0 touchdowns. Is he the best corner in the league?
I think he's one of them, honestly, and I think it would be really interesting going into the trade deadline if the Broncos continue to keep losing, because we saw last year with Bradley Chubb, they were willing to trade away a big player if the right price come. And I think there are probably some cornerback hungry teams. I know my Detroit Lions are very hungry for a cornerback right now. And I think if they came in with a huge package, then Patrick Surtain, he could potentially be on the block.
So let's switch over to the Kansas City Chiefs. What has impressed you with the Kansas City Chiefs this year?
I think obviously the Chiefs, Mahomes is always going to be a superstar there. I think their receiving games looked a bit lackluster. I think them as a whole look a bit worse off, but that sort of happened last year. I remember the start of the season last year, the Chiefs didn't hit on flying cylinders, but as the year goes on, they just get better and better, and then they always peak at the right time, right at the end. So I'm a bit worried with Travis Kelce. I think he probably will miss this match with an ankle sprain. So it'll be interesting to see what they do in the receiving game there, because I think that was a big reason why they lost to the Lions in week 1. But yeah, as a whole, their defense is actually playing good again. It's always above average. Chris Jones has come in after his little hiatus. He's back to being one of the best defensive linemen in the league. So they're just a consistently good team, really, aren't they?
And the Chiefs seem to have leaders on all different levels. Trent McDuffie's having a very good season. Nick Bolton's one of the better linebackers in the leagues in terms of stopping the run. Do the Chiefs do they rely too much on Chris Jones in terms of getting after the quarterback, or do you think they have unearthed a few more pass rushers?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of their linebacker courts. I think they've got a fair good linebacker, definitely in that front seven, and it makes the D line's job a hell of a lot easier. Like a person you mentioned, Nick Bolton, I think he's really a rising star in this league. He's a linebacker that's not talked about enough. You got Willie Gay in there as well, and Leo Chanel, another big body linebacker. So you got the first round pick, George Karlaftis. He was late first last year. I think a lot of people thought he would be a middle round pick, so he's coming along nicely. He's not that consistent edge rusher, I think, just yet, but for sure I'm a big fan of this linebacker court for the Chiefs.
So one of the areas we kind of talked about earlier with the Chiefs offense, they seem to be running the ball a lot more successfully this year. And why do you think that is? Do you think it's a change of emphasis by Matt Nagy, the offensive coordinator? And do you think it's working with the Chiefs?
Yeah, I think it is. I think you do look at a lot of the top teams like the 49ers and like the Eagles. They are predominantly running teams, and the Chiefs have always been a very high passing team. I think a main reason why is because they don't quite have the receivers they used to have. I think we're seeing guys like Sky Moore haven't really kicked on this year to what they thought with like Kadarius Toney as well. So Isaiah Pistachio, he's also a great running back. You can't really do that. So, and he's been their bell cow, really just constantly taking that ball. So I don't mind the change in approach. I think running the ball sometimes can be good. It sets up the pass better, but I do think it might be because some of these receivers they expected to be haven't quite hit just this early on in the season.
I was looking up today in terms of yards and touchdowns. I think Kelce obviously is the player that is the most targeted. He's the most yards. He's 3 touchdowns on the season so far. But after that, I think all the other receivers only have 1 touchdown, except for Rashee Rice, who has 2 touchdowns. And I think whenever I've seen Rashee Rice, he always seems to have poor hands. He seems to drop a lot of balls. Do you think the Chiefs, as we approach the trade deadline in around week 8, that they could go out and maybe try and get a receiver? And could one of those receivers be from the team they're playing on Thursday night, Jerry Jeudy? Like if the Broncos continue their poor start, Jerry Jeudy, he's out of contract, I think, at the end of next season with his 5th-year option. Could he be traded, and would he make a big difference to the Chiefs? Do you think that's something that could be on the table?
Yeah, it's definitely a good shout if you think of that. I think, like I say, the Chiefs they've been spreading the ball out a lot more. They had 10 different people catch a reception this past game against the Vikings, so they kind of are missing that. They don't need a receiver, I think, on the level like Tyreek Hill, but having a more number 1 receiver, whilst Kelce is obviously your superstar, I think it's a good shot. And I think Jerry Jeudy, I think he'll fit well on that. Like I say, he's a guy that's great at route running, and it's never really kicked on for him at Denver. He's struggled there his whole few years whilst being there. So I think a change of scenery could be very good for them. It's just, would a divisional trade happen like that? Would Denver allow that? I'm not too sure.
Yeah, there was a few rumours today about Mecole Hardman. The Jets might be looking to trade him. He hasn't really made the impact expected in the Jets, and he's a former Chiefs player who would know the offense. I think he'd be somebody who comes across that'd be difficult to manage in terms of personality, but they would know what they'd be getting in terms of Mecole Hardman. So he could be another one that they might be able to pick up on the cheap, especially if the Jets want him out of the building. So is there any, heading into Thursday Night Football, is there any silver lining for the Broncos heading in terms of looking to get a win in this fixture. I don't think they've beaten the Chiefs since Peyton Manning was their quarterback in 2015, which is fairly embarrassing against a divisional rival that you meet twice a year. So, what do you think the Broncos will try and emphasise heading into Thursday Night Football?
I think for sure it's got to be to start defense, to start stopping people, because it really feels like most games, this team the offense is behind. I know for the Jets they weren't for the first half, but they've got to start, on a defensive level. They've got to start slowing teams down, making things easier for the offense, start establishing a run game, because that's been something they haven't been able to do whilst trailing a lot of the time. So it's not easy when you're going up against probably one of the best offenses we've seen in the last 5 years. So it's certainly going to be tough for them, and I can't see it too much happening, but I'm sort of expecting a response from Sean Payton at some point.
Yeah, one player I'd like to see get a lot more of the ball is that new running back, Jaleel McLaughlin. I think he had over 160 yards and had a brilliant touchdown against the Jets on Sunday. He kind of juggled the ball and caught it and stepped in, and just seems to have a lot of gas in the tank. I'm not really. I think it'll actually be really, really interesting if Kelce is out, because I think with Kelce I can't really see the Broncos really upsetting the Chiefs. But I think with Kelce out, it'll be really interesting to see what the Chiefs will do. This is their worst case scenario other than Patrick Mahomes getting injured in terms of their offense. What's your prediction? How do you see the game going? Or do you think it's going to be an easy night for the Chiefs?
I think the Chiefs will probably do it comfortably, but I also don't want to doubt a Denver. It seems funny because I sort of compare Denver to a British audience like Chelsea. They're a team that sort of spends money. They have these big players, but it's just not working and consistently not working. So I'm expecting them to respond at some point. I don't think Sean Payton is. I think he's still a good coach, obviously, and I think he will eventually get this team to just blow out 1 week and surprise someone. But I don't see it happening personally against the Chiefs on a short week.
So one last thing before we finish up, Sean Payton had called Nathaniel Hackett the worst coach in NFL history, and it came back to bite him in the ass. Have you ever noticed the NFL taking so much glee in that coach losing the game? And also, what do you think the Broncos? How do you think the Broncos are going to respond over the next few weeks? They have a lot of tough games coming up.
Yeah, like I say, you mentioned there, they got some really tough games. They've got to play Chiefs twice now in the next 3 weeks, and then after their bye week, they're straight on to Buffalo. So we're honestly could be looking at a much worse start than it is, and potentially 2-7, 1-8. And if that was to be the case, it would be really interesting to see what happens, because they've committed to Sean Payton, they've committed to Russell Wilson, and I don't think there's really anything majorly they can do in the middle of the season bar getting rid of them, which I don't think they would consider personally. But I think they might have to start looking towards next season and try and start honestly building something, because they've thrown so much of these draft picks away and a lot of their money's tied up. Trade deadline will always be interesting. They could be buyers, but I think they're more likely to be sellers if these results keep going poorly. So I'm expecting Payton to turn it around. That's easier said than done. If it doesn't, then there's going to be some big thinking. The general manager, he doesn't honestly have a lot of power with Payton in there. I think Payton is a guy that's making a lot of the decisions with who's coming in. So I could see a general manager maybe going, and then they bring in someone maybe from the Saints, a buddy of Sean Payton, to try and just get chemistry working. So it's going to be bad if the Denver don't turn things around sharply. And with their fixtures, like we said, with Kansas City and Buffalo as 3 times in their next 4 games, it could get bad like that.
And if the Broncos are, say, 1-7 after 8 weeks, things go from bad to worse, and they end up with the first overall pick next season, do you think that they would trade the first overall pick for, say, 4 first-rounders, or would they take a chance on maybe Caleb Williams?
Yeah, it would be interesting because they need the draft picks. So I think for sure they would probably love to get a huge package, but I think they would definitely consider drafting Caleb Williams. I'm not too sure when they can actually get out of this Russell Wilson contract. I don't know if it can be this year. They probably can, but they would have to take a lot of dead cap for it when they're already taking it. But even if you maybe had Caleb Williams behind Russell Wilson for, I wouldn't imagine it'd be behind him for too long, but it would be a very interesting dynamic with Caleb Williams, because he's also a guy that might stay in college. You know, with these new deals in college, you can make money still, so he may stay for a senior year, but he could also, if he thinks Denver are a team that he could work with, if he thinks Sean Payton is a good coach and is going to be here for the long run, I think it would make that discussion real interesting.
Yeah, no, it's certainly exciting times ahead in terms of the Broncos. They're coming to a difficult point, but sometimes it's always darkest before the dawn, and that might very well work out to be the case. So, Conor, thanks very much for another week. Some great analysis there, and I'm really looking forward to the game on Thursday night. And we'll chat again later in the week to preview another NFL game.
Pleasure as always.